build the parts of Zah, which is basically the concept that the midos themselves have chokhmah of the midos, and bina of the midos, and chesed of the midos, and there's those 6 points, each one. In other words, this is an interesting one. There's 6, which builds their own little realm called Zah. So you make a face and an inter-inclusion out of the realm called midos, which becomes the parts of Zah.
Even though each midah is its own parts.
Each midah is not really called its own parts in the same way. I mean, the truth is that each midah has an inter-inclusion quality, but there's no partsuf of chesed, so to speak. Right? The partsuf is that you get basically what you have really is like yud k vav k, right? So the idea is the yud is Abba, the hey is bina, the vav is called the vav is gematria 6 because it represents this notion of like 6 points of extremes of but they're all in the same realm. Those 6 points, they have each one has more to do with each other than any of them have to do with, let's say, chokhmah or bina, because they're in a plane called midos. They're just 6 manifestations of midos, but they're all in the realm of emotion as opposed to intellect. So that whole realm of emotion becomes a partsuf, which means that basically they're all united with each other. Is the main thing that he says there. There is chacham in the partsuf, but the idea is that the whole concept of partsuf Zah is that Zah really is 6 spheros, right? But the idea is that instead of being 6 spheros, which are all independent of each other, you end up with a whole realm called emotion, which each emotion gets inter-included in a whole partsuf, just like in the other partsuf. But just like all of a sudden from chokhmah, you can create 10 spheres of chokhmah. So for emotion, you create 10 spheres of emotion, which sort of takes into account all the different 6 individual midos, but inter-includes them, and also inter-includes the intellect with them, and malchus with them, and creates basically 10 out of 6. Okay. And the point being is that shu nischalkim asfiros b'hapratos b'hispashtus hapratim leprati pratios. So this, what it does is it divides the spheros by expanding them into the details of details, which in general is tes pamim tes, which is basically 9 times 9. Because each sphera, in other words, you have what's missing from the 9 times 9 is the sphere of malchus, because malchus is in general a partsuf which is like the nekeva, it's like the feminine principle. So it's just a receiver of the 9. So in other words, there's really 9 parts which define the body, and then the whole 10th part, which is malchus, is really a different body which just receives them. So in any parts, there's really 9 parts which are the positive parts. The fact that there's going to be like a kli for those parts is not then therefore counted in the distribution of the parts of the light that's going to go into that kli. You understand that? So notice when we're talking about making a partsuf, let's say of chokhmah, so the union of malchus of chokhmah is not really part of that partsuf. It's going to be the kli, which is the receptor of all the breakdown of the parts of chokhmah. So therefore, it's not counted in when you break them down into all its parts. It's not counted because it's counted later when all those parts then unite and get expressed through malchus. And that's what we said in the previous mind. Remember we said that malchus is called nakuda tachas hayesod. Remember we talked about that? Malchus is called a point underneath yesod. Meaning to say that in its original state of malchus, it's not part of the whole picture of what goes on above it. It's just a receptor. Just when you break down all those, the level of yesod into all of its parts, which we're going to see is 9 times 9 and a whole calculation there, and all the parts get broken down, So then if Malchus is bittul enough, it can receive all those parts, and it therefore sort of is a mirror image of everything that's going to come above it. But it's a separate body. It represents the woman as opposed to the man. So what we're saying here is we're breaking down the parts of any partsuf into their details. And this is called 9 times 9. So each sphera gets broken down into 9. There's 9 spheres, and each one has all the other ones in it. So it's 9 times 9. Yeah? And then b'kol echad rosh toch v'sof. And then each sphera, each one of these 9 times 9, each one of those 81, you have a top, a middle, and a bottom. Right? Because there's 3 parts of every sphere, which is basically the Chabad Chagas Nehi. Right? So each one of these 81 has 3 parts. Chabad is Chochmah Bein Hadas, Chagas is Ches Gevurah Tiferes, Nehi is Netzach Hod Yisod. So they're broken down into 3 parts. Rosh Toch Sof. So that comes out to 43. And then the Hei Chasadim. Plus the Hei Chasadim, which is basically 5 more parts of Chesed, which enliven them. It's like the light, which Hamagdilim, which brings the actual light to enliven them. So these are sort of just the source of hashpah, exactly.
So, everything?
Of each partsuf. In other words, in a certain sense, each partsuf breaks itself down into a certain level of limitations. What's the limitation of Chesed? It has its limitation. What's the limitation of Gevurah? It has its limitation. It's almost like the Kli, basically, which defines what's going to be with the light. And then the Hei Chasadim comes in to fill each Kli with actual energies that can exist. So the Hei Chasadim is sort of like the underlying energizing factor, which breathes life into all these different potential levels of koach in each partsuf. The partsuf is everything, basically. So if you add all those numbers up, you get 248. 9
How do we get all that?
9
times 9 is 81.
9 times 9 is 81.
243.
Times 3 is 243.
Where'd you get the 5?
Because each one is divided into 3. And then the 5 is the Hei Chasadim, these 5 levels of Chesed, which come in and give life to everything. They breathe life into everything. 3 levels in each piece. Which is basically Panemius, Emtsoyus, Chitzonius, right? There's the idea of like a vessel, it has the inner part of a cup which touches the water. It has the outer part which touches the hand, and it has like the thing itself, which is the middle, right? So every level is intrinsically divided into 3 pieces. And then there's the idea of the light which enlivens each thing and brings it to life, so to speak. So that's the 5 chasadim. This is a partsuf. And that's where the whole number 248 comes from, which is the number of like limbs in our body. In other words, we're also created in this image, right? The reason why we have 248 limbs is because we are basically like a representation of the detailed account of the 10 spheros, the 9 spheros, right? Chasadim. Those are the Hei Gevuros. The final letters represent the 5 Gevuros, which basically it's like the mouthpiece. They're also connected with the 5 parts of the mouth, which make letters, which break down the pure air into parts. So the whole breakdown into 248, like the ability to break something down, let's like chomp it up basically, comes from the Hei Gevuros. The 5 parts of Gevurah, which is basically how Hashem speaks and breaks everything into parts. So the Hei Gevuros is the source of what is the ability to break everything down. The Hei Chasadim is like the pure air which is being broken down, which is the enlivening factor, which gives everything its life force. The Hei Chasadim and the Hei Gevuros are Panemius Atik. Those are the original things that are, basically. And at the level of Atik, they're really one. In other words, at a certain point, these are the two opposites within Hashem, which are really residing as one. The parts which is the Gevura, and the parts which is the Chesed, in their source, they're really one. And when they express themselves into these two opposite powers. That's all you need to know. Class dismissed.
We need to know that.
Oof. All right. So, V'gam. Nice is klalus asfirus. So it breaks them down into all the parts. It also includes this. So this is the difference between Toe and Tikkun. Toe is just points. It doesn't have this breakdown into 248.
You only have 9.
And it also, they're not inter-included. They're like an onion. They're all separate from each other. So Tikkun is the opposite. It breaks them all down into parts, and they're all inter-included. So that your liver and your brain, there's a relationship between them, which is the blood that's flowing through them, which gives each limb access to every other limb. So they're not only are they broken down into parts, but they're also relating to each other. Everybody's getting along with each other and recognizing that it can't exist without the other one, and they all are parts of a whole.
This number doesn't exist in both, right? It doesn't exist at all.
Right. Only in potential, I guess you could say. He's klalus asfiras zumis. There's also an inter-inclusion of the spheres, as we say. So the mashal for these two levels of Tohu and Tikkun can be found in the powers of the soul shabaguf. In other words, we can make a metaphor as it is in humanity. Shiremach kochos hanefesh nislavshim b'remach evri aguf. That the powers, the 248 powers of the soul, woo, it's intense stuff, no?
Is this
No, because each thing is like really, we're not totally. It's complicated. I don't know if we're mamash getting our heads around the whole business. We're sort of just reading along. What's that?
Is this from writing the Arizal?
Yeah. I mean, this is basically, he's not inventing these concepts of Partsufim and so forth. He's explaining them. What's the difference exactly between Tohu and Tikkun? Difference between, I mean, he's clarifying, in other words, what it says over there in a distinct way. In other words, over there, it doesn't say, it says in different chapters of the books, what are the qualities of Tohu, what are qualities of Tikkun. Here he's like putting them and comparing them so you can see clearly the difference. So, we can see it in a human being, that the 248 powers of the soul, which are invested into the limbs of the body. For example, koach hariyah mislaveshes ba'ayin, the power of sight invests itself into the physical eye. The power of hearing into the ear, the power of deed into the hands, the power of walking into the feet. So each power actually comes down into the body and invests into a physical kli. B'chinas zu, hu in hispashtus v'islavshus kochos hanefesh bekelim shene ivarim. And this is the idea of expressing and investing the powers of the soul into the vessels, which are the limbs. So these soul powers do not necessarily have to invest. There's an existence of these soul powers before they come into a physical body. Before your physical body is a house and a container for your spiritual powers exist in an unexpressed, unexpounded state in spirituality somewhere. And when they come into the body, it means each one goes into its individual place, and the point, so to speak, becomes a partsuf, right? All the powers which are not yet having a kli to hold them, they're all like sort of residing as a oneness, as a point. It's like b'derech klal, in a kitzer, you have all these powers. But they don't, until there's a kli to hold them, and literally individualize each and every power into its vessel, they're not yet expounded and expressed into details. So what we're seeing here is that when the soul comes into the body, it's like a form of tikkun, where all the details come out, and now all the powers can relate to each other as they all are existing in different parts. Whereas before they come into a body, when they're sort of in potential, the parts are not seen, and everything is like one nakuda, right? They're in potential there, but they're not expounded and expressed. So the body, there being a kli, enables the parts to come out and express themselves and relate to one another in this way. V'od nimtza b'chinas achas hakoleles es kol prati hakochos mischalkim be'varim hanal. And there's also one level which contains all these parts of the soul, which are divided into the body, as we just said. But there's a level where they're not yet divided. And this point contains, it like circles around all these powers before they invest into the soul, from head to foot. And this is called a higher level, just like Tikkun, Torah is higher than Tikkun, because before they come and get expressed, they're sort of in a klal potential state, which is one point, right, where all these parts are really inside of one, and head and foot are all found in the same place simultaneously, which on one hand is sort of quite a wonder, right? In a certain sense, it's higher, because the spirituality is packed into one point and not yet expressed. When it gets expressed, it has to go through a tzimtzum and a separation process. Behind when, where is this point found? B'chinas hamachshava shel adam. This is sort of the thought of man. Inside of your thoughts, you have all of your different parts found in one place. Kenira ba'alil, as you can see, shkasher yichva tziporen, when the fingernail gets burned, the toenail, tziporen raklav, targish tekef b'machshava, you immediately feel in your thought, ha'kev, the pain. So you see that even though the fingernail is in its own spot, and the power of the fingernail to grow, whatever its power is in a place which is distinct from the brain, all the powers are nevertheless found simultaneously in one point. Your eyesight, your hearing, your feeling, your heart, everything is even though it's expressed in its own kli, it also has a certain point where all the parts are still found as one. And that's in your head, in your brain. So we're going to see here that the thought is sort of compared to tohu, whereas the expression of the thought into each and every kli is going to be compared to tikkun. But we'll get into it further. I guess tomorrow morning, Shabbos. So all are invited for we have Shabbos V'vorchim. So we're going to say Tehillim. But okay, Sunday we'll finish it.
Where's it go?
The next page. Also, already by the time we get there, it's going to be Parshas Vayera.
Yeah.
So we're going to